Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of SABA North America and SABA-DC, we wanted to welcome everybody to this very exciting presidential town hall. This is an event we've really been looking forward to, and we are excited to welcome people from across the country in viewing what I'm expecting to be a very exciting event. So to get started, I'm going to introduce Sri Srinivasan. He is our moderator this evening. He is the inaugural Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism. During the COVID-19 crisis, he's been hosting a daily global conversation on social media. Sri runs DigiMentors, a digital, social, and virtual events consulting company working with corporations and nonprofits around the world. He has served as Chief Digital Officer of New York City, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Columbia University, where he was a full-time professor of journalism for over 20 years. In 2015, Fast Company named him one of the 100 most creative people in business, and in 2010, he was named one of the 35 most influential people in social media by the Poynter Institute. In 2014, he was named most influential CDO by CDO Club. He is also the co-founder of SAJA, the South Asian Journalists Association. SABA North America and SABA-DC are proud to welcome him to moderate this evening, and I'm going to hand it over to him to get things started.
All right, thank you so much, Priya, and a very generous introduction. My mom, who's asleep now, would be very excited to watch this on the recording and hear that. So thank you very much. Big thank you to SABA-DC and SABA North America for having me here. Our friends at SAJA have worked very closely with SABA over the years, and I'm just really glad to be here with all of you. So good evening, everyone, and good greetings to Asheesh and to Neera. Welcome to our town hall. I'm honored to be your moderator. At the outset, let's note this is not the Presidential Debate Commission, and I'm not Kristen Welker. My job is to be mainly timekeeper and traffic cop. In 2012, I moderated a healthcare debate on the Columbia campus, and one of the debaters was a young doctor who would go on to become Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. So no pressure on our speakers today. We're going to be using Twitter to take questions, but also to share what's happening here. The hashtag is SABA Town Hall, SABA Town Hall, all smushed together. So please use that. And we're also live right now on Diya TV USA. Go to YouTube, and Diya, DIYA TV USA is live streaming this right now, and it's also being recorded so you can share this with friends and family. Here's the format we're using tonight. We have a 90-minute debate today, which will give us time to get into a lot of details, unlike some of the conversations we have about what's going to happen with the elections. I know I won't need to use the mute button with these speakers because they're going to be very cooperative in making sure we cover a lot of ground. We'll be covering 9 topics today with about 10 minutes each. We'll have COVID-19, healthcare, the economy, immigration, race and civil rights, the environment, foreign affairs, including South Asia, the judiciary and the Supreme Court, and voting. There will be no opening statements, but each speaker will be given a chance to make a closing statement of up to 2 minutes. For each of the 9 topics, I have a series of questions that I will ask. No one has seen them before. I will read them out loud to you tonight. We will bring in audience questions along the way, so if you can make sure you restrict your questions to the topic at hand, that would be very helpful to make sure we stay on time. For each question, the person I address the question to will get up to 2 minutes to answer, and followed by up to 2 minutes response from the other speaker. Again, I encourage them when necessary to go up to 2 minutes, but if they can keep it shorter, we can get more questions in. We will have a timer I'll be showing on screen during the first part of the countdown, and then again in the last 20 seconds. You're encouraged to post questions when in the chat, as long as they're in that time block. That would be great. And if we have time towards the end of the debate, I'll also have a lightning round with short questions and 30-second answers. We were going to toss a coin in advance, and we didn't get a chance to do that. So I am going to randomly just go from 2 names here and just say, Asheesh, pick a number, and I will pick 4, the letter A or the letter B, and that will determine whether you go first or second, because that corresponds to a number here.
I'm going to go with A for Agarwal.
Okay, very good. And you did not win, so Neera gets to pick whether she wants to go first or second. Neera?
I'm happy to go second.
Okay.
Asheesh
All
can go
right.
first.
All right. And so now let's meet the speakers and introduce them properly. Asheesh Agarwal is an attorney who serves on the advisory board of Indian Voices for Trump. He served in the Trump administration as general counsel to the Social Security Administration and has held other senior roles in government, including the U.S. Department of Justice as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division. In 2012, Asheesh served as then Representative Mike Pence's legal policy advisor when he ran for governor of Indiana. Asheesh has been active in South Asian and Asian American circles throughout his life. He co-founded the Indian American Bar Association of Chicago, as it was then called, and currently serves on the board of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of Indiana. He received his JD from the University of Chicago Law School and his BA from Northwestern. He lives in Indiana with his wife and 2 children outside of Indianapolis. Just pretend there was rousing applause. And I'm sorry that this is not what this is all that we could give you in this virtual format. Now to introduce Neera. Neera Tanden is the president and CEO is the CEO of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. And she focuses on how its organization can fulfill its mission to expand opportunity for all Americans. She has served in both the Obama and Clinton administrations, as well as on presidential campaigns. She previously served as senior advisor for health reform at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. In that role, she developed policies around reform and worked with Congress and stakeholders on particular provisions of President Obama's signature legislative achievement, the Affordable Care Act. Neera has served as the Director of Domestic Policy for the Obama-Biden presidential campaign. She also held senior positions in Hillary Clinton's first presidential campaign and in her 2000 run for Senate. Neera received her Bachelor of Science from the University of California at UCLA and her law degree from Yale Law School. And she lives in Washington, D.C. with her family. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for bringing your time and your energy and attention to this event. We really want to shine as much light on the issues as possible and help our members of SABA understand the issues and really look at what happens in the next 2 weeks that are left. So if we're ready to go, we're going to get started, and I'm always going to be showing you this our countdown as we start. So you have 2 minutes, Asheesh, to answer the first question. And the question is, how are we to judge the U.S. response to COVID-19? So Asheesh, over to you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Sri, for that question, and thank you, SABA, for hosting this. It's always great to be back with this wonderful organization. So, in terms of COVID-19, I think what you have is a president who took responsible actions early on to limit the spread of the crisis, and throughout this terrible and difficult time for our country and the world, has taken responsible measures to try to prepare the United States for getting through this pandemic and moving on and reopening our economy. So let's start from the beginning. A situation that nobody fully anticipated, or certainly last winter expected to know how bad this was going to be. The president very early on took decisive action to limit the spread of the virus, starting with the travel ban from China and from Europe, a step which former Vice President Biden called xenophobic, which Speaker Pelosi mocked, and visited Chinatown to show her disdain for that action. President Trump's early actions saved countless lives by limiting the spread of the virus and giving us time to learn about it and take appropriate precautions. Since then, the president has really helped cut through a lot of the bureaucracy to help the country develop a vaccine. Operation Warp Speed, public-private partnerships. The United States is at the forefront of the world's search for a vaccine. The president, the administration are working with multiple pharmaceutical companies across the globe That's not something that necessarily every administration would have done because it required cutting through a lot of red tape and sometimes overruling some scientists. I think what concerns me about a Biden administration is how would they manage risk? Because it's all well and good to say, hey, we're going to listen to the scientists. That's great, but scientists sometimes disagree. There are scientists who just a few months ago were saying it was incredibly dangerous to open up our elementary schools.
Asheesh, we're out of time. You'll have another question on this topic, so you'll be able to answer. Now,
I'll just go with one more sentence, which is that I do think that the president wants to manage these risks in an appropriate way so that we can both defeat the virus but also continue to grow our economy.
Okay, thank you. Neera, you have up to 2 minutes to respond.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to SABA. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. It's always great to be with you. And let me just say, I think the job of a president is to protect the life and health of Americans. That is the most basic responsibility of a president. And Donald Trump has failed miserably at that job. Over 210,000 Americans have died. There's new data from the CDC that number might be double, but by any measure, we have had 210,000 people die from the virus in the United States. That the United States has 4% of the world's population and over 20% of the world's deaths from this virus. Asheesh mentioned the travel ban from the beginning, but and I will take on the travel ban. But the truth about the response of the Trump administration is that it has been a failure from the beginning, middle, and even now. The travel ban, which has been hyped a great deal, had 44,000 people from China get through the travel ban. That is not a real ban. That is basically an open border to speak of. But the truth is, the president knew in February. He told Bob Woodward that this was an airborne virus that was, a big problem. And he hid that truth from the American people at a time where people could have taken steps and did not. And then he has to this day never had a national plan to contain the virus. Never had a national plan around masks, never had a national plan around testing, never had a national plan around contact tracing. So we have 50 state plans and ineffective response, and 200,000 people have died. And I think many of those deaths are due to the incompetence of this administration.
Sri, if I might.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. So I'm going to ask Neera a question, and then you will get a chance to respond. So Neera, the question to you is, what is at stake going forward with the coronavirus, after the election, and what is the plan that Vice President Biden, as president, if he wins, would bring into play?
So the Vice President Biden has articulated a plan in March to contain the virus. It was ensuring that everyone wore masks, that we have social distancing, that we have contact tracing, national contact tracing. We have PPE for everyone. We have a nationwide response. And why is that important? What we've learned over the last several months is that we don't actually have to close down the economy. What we need to do is to have essentially 100% mask use, 95%, 90% mask use, which will cut the transmission rate of the virus. Today, we have over 50,000 people testing positive day by day by day. We are in the third surge. The Biden-Harris administration would make fighting the virus the top priority of the administration. And in doing so, we'd better be able to reopen our economy. But let's be clear, other countries have been able to manage the virus. They have been able to contain the virus. They have been able to stop the virus. And they've done that with a national plan. For some reason, this president has always resisted a national plan. He's allowed the states to do this. The virus knows no border. It doesn't honor a state border. So we've seen the virus spread throughout the country. And again, we are 8 months into this crisis, and we are now in our third surge. This is a failure. And if we continue on this path, if Donald Trump is reelected, there is no evidence, given his own behavior and the way he acts, going to rallies where people aren't wearing masks, that he will take this virus seriously at all, and more people will die.
Okay, thank you. You have up to 2 minutes, Asheesh, to respond.
Sure. Well, it's very easy for Joe Biden to sit in his basement and pick holes at what the administration is doing. But the fact is, you have a president who has been fully and completely engaged in combating the coronavirus since day one. I mean, you all recall the daily briefings, which our friends in the media on the left soon got tired of, in which the president, in great detail, outlined what was being done to increase testing. The United States has done more testing per capita than any country in the world. More than 100 million tests, almost 1 million tests a day are being done to increase mask production, ventilator production. When this administration took power from the Obama-Biden administration, the national stockpile of N95 masks had been depleted, and that was a failure of the Obama-Biden administration. But beyond that, more generally, look, we have been facing a global pandemic that is unprecedented in our lifetime. The president mobilized the private sector and the public sector to rapidly increase testing and put all of the precautions in place and start our cure and start the search for a cure and for a vaccine. Again, my concern with a Biden administration is twofold. One, does Joe Biden have the energy to make the decisions that are going to be necessary on a daily basis? We see this week that I guess he's in his basement. He's not making any public appearances in advance of.
That's just false.
In advance, well, that's what has been reported. In advance of the debate on Thursday, and secondly. What is his risk tolerance? It's fine. I appreciate Neera saying that Joe Biden doesn't want to shut down the country again. I suppose at one level, none of us do, but there are always people who have a very low risk tolerance who are going to want that to happen. President Trump has managed our health needs with our economic needs.
Okay.
Can I respond?
So I'm going to
Okay.
ask you the next question is
Great.
to you, and then you can incorporate your answer. Otherwise, we'll never get through all the topics that we need.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, no,
Go
it's
ahead.
okay. I understand. We just want to get through as much as we can. You're also seeing in the chat, there are some comments and questions coming in. You're welcome to incorporate those into your answers. We're now going to talk about healthcare. And as we heard in our introduction, Neera helped put together the Affordable Care Act when in the Obama administration. So my question to you, Neera, is do you think that it is in danger, in mortal danger? Is there an existential threat to it? And what are the circumstances under which, if it comes to be that it is in danger, what is at stake for this country?
Great. Thank you so much for that question. The Trump administration currently has a lawsuit pending. The Supreme Court will hear the case a week after the election, November 10th. So the president is right now arguing in court to eviscerate the entirety of the Affordable Care Act. That means 135 million people who currently have pre-existing condition protections will lose those pre-existing conditions. The pre-existing condition protections. Over 20 million people who rely on the ACA for healthcare will lose their healthcare in a pandemic. So just as a reminder, we will add to the uninsurance rolls if Donald Trump has his way in court. And of course, there is now a Supreme Court Justice nominee who has stated her past opposition to the ACA very, very clearly. So the consequences for this election, the consequences to people's healthcare of this election are grave. And I will say the challenge really is that Donald Trump has never proposed an alternative for the ACA. We are 14 days from the election, 14 days, and the president has still not outlined his proposal to replace the ACA. So at this moment, people would lose their healthcare coverage. If the Supreme Court agrees with the Trump administration, they will lose their healthcare and there will be no alternative. And that is a recipe for disaster. Joe Biden has a plan to build on the ACA using a public option. That public option allows everyone who has insurance to keep their insurance, but also allows people who don't have health insurance to get health insurance. But we should be proud of the fact that the ACA has worked effectively to lower healthcare costs for people, but also provides so much needed health insurance right now during this pandemic.
Well, Neera just repeated perhaps the biggest lie perpetrated on the American public in the last decade. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Remember that little chestnut from President Obama and Vice President Biden? Well, that was a lie. They knew they were lying about that at the time. And they sold the Affordable Care Act to the American public as a lie. Remember the individual mandate, how they promised us repeatedly that it wasn't a tax. The mandate is not a tax. And yet, lo and behold, they go to the Supreme Court. They intimidate John Roberts into upholding it on the basis of the taxing power. And I'm sure the many lawyers in the audience will remember that. Since we're on Joe Biden, let me stick with that for a minute and say, his healthcare plan is more radical than anything that President Obama ever proposed. The public option is something that will crowd out and eventually destroy private healthcare in this country. And you don't need to ask me about that. Ask the architect of Obamacare, Jonathan Grubert, I believe is how you say his name. But what happens is that with the public option, there will be demands for more and more taxpayer money to go to support that program, and eventually private insurance will be crowded out. So it'll be yet another segment of the economy that's taken over by the government. I don't think most people want that. Now, President Trump's plan relies on free market principles and trying to give individuals more choice. So, for instance, in this global pandemic, the president of the administration have cut through a lot of telehealth regulations so that Americans, particularly in rural areas, can get health care from their homes. He's issued 4 executive orders to lower drug care prices, including allowing drug importations from other countries through most favored nation status. And he has made crystal clear that the Trump administration will protect and cover people with pre-existing conditions.
Okay, we have lots of great questions coming in. I'm going to save some of those for the lightning round and also for when we have more time and kind of a more free-for-all a little bit later. But now a question for Asheesh. This has also been asked in the questions, and Neera also alluded to it. What is the plan if it gets struck down in the Supreme Court? What will happen? Can you walk me through the steps of what happens if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, that's a great question, but one unfortunately that I can't answer in any great detail because it depends on what the court were to rule. There's this whole issue of severability, and so what does it mean for the Affordable Care Act to actually be struck down, and what would the court do with that is unclear. But I can tell you what the principles are that the administration relies on, and it goes back to trying to give people more ability to control their own healthcare through expanded use of health savings accounts, so that people can be responsible for their own for their own health and make their own healthcare decisions. It relies on being able to give people more choices through tools like telemedicine, and it relies on those free market principles to reduce costs. I see in the chat room we have some questions pointing out that the Affordable Care Act has become unaffordable for millions of Americans. I read an analysis recently that due to the ACA, premiums have tripled and deductibles have doubled. I might have that backward, and Neera, who's forgotten more about healthcare than I'll ever know, might correct me. Maybe it's the case that premiums have doubled or deductibles have tripled. I might have that wrong, but the Affordable Care Act is not working, for millions of Americans, and its ultimate repeal. The president started that process by eliminating the individual mandate. Will allow Americans to have more choice.
So I would just, there's a lot of error, like just falsehoods I really need to correct. First of all, over the last 4 years, the ACA, the premiums within the ACA have not gone up actually more than private premiums. They've gone up less than private premiums. You would think sort of the Trump administration would take credit for that, but that's fine. What you just heard in description of the alternative, if the bill fails, is a series of principles. So just to make clear, if the Supreme Court accedes to the Trump administration's wish, that means millions of people will lose health insurance because the Trump administration is arguing to get rid of the whole bill, regardless of severability. The Trump administration position is to rule against the entirety of the bill. That is what Donald Trump wants, and since there are only principles in response, that means there's no bill, there's no legislative language. That means people will lose their health insurance who are relying on it for health insurance, and they will lose pre-existing condition protections. And Donald Trump can say he supports pre-existing conditions. Asheesh can say Donald Trump supports pre-existing conditions, but you need a law to protect pre-existing conditions from discrimination by insurance companies, which was the law of the land about a decade ago before the ACA. So that is really vital. Also, just to say, the Biden plan is not a radical plan. It is actually not different than what Barack Obama proposed in his original package of legislation that I was honored to work on when I worked to pass the ACA. It didn't pass before, but it is not a radical position. A public option has passed the House before. It does not eliminate private insurance. It is only available to those people outside of private insurance in the individual market today. So the idea that it will radically swallow up all of private insurance is completely false. That is one of the reasons why Joe Biden was attacked in the primary as having too moderate a plan by his opponents in the primary on the left, because it is a moderate plan. And by the way, 70% of Americans, including 25% of Republicans, support a public option today. Again, not a radical plan. Joe Biden has put forward a plan to actually strengthen the ACA and lower the costs that people have. It is a real concern that people are experiencing high costs in the ACA. One of the reasons they are is because Republicans have made so many efforts to undermine and attack the ACA. Actually getting rid of the individual mandate has raised costs in the ACA. Still competitive with private insurance, but I appreciate that it's harder for middle-class families, and that's why one of Joe Biden's first acts as president will be to improve the subsidy so it's more affordable to middle-class Americans, and is another reason why healthcare is an important issue and an important issue to vote for Joe Biden.
Thank you. And we are now at the top of the hour. We have 60 minutes left, and we have lots of things to get through, so we're going to do our best. Our next topic is the economy, and the first question goes to Asheesh. This president has repeatedly told us what a great economy there was before the pandemic, and now where the stock market is doing great. I think a lot of people would agree that the economy was doing well for a certain part of America. As you know, something like 40% of Americans could not afford to a $400 cross-country ticket for any reason, because they were that much on the edge. So if that was the great economy, how do we explain what happens going forward, and what do we say to all those people who weren't benefiting from the great economy?
Sure, Sheree. Well, that's a great question, and you are right to remind our viewers that it was just perhaps the best economy in American history just a few short months ago. It's hard to remember sometime. President Trump deserves a lot of credit for creating that economic climate. Start with the tax cuts. which of course, spurred growth, but they also strategically helped our country grow because they gave corporations an incentive to return investment to the United States. So companies were investing here rather than abroad through repatriation of income. Second thing he did was deregulation, which acts as a tax cut because it becomes less expensive for employers and businesses to have to comply with the law. There are analyses that for every new regulation has been promulgated, more than half a dozen have been deleted. The third thing that he did was strengthen our trade agreements to make them work for America. So USMCA, which is the new NAFTA, includes protections for American auto workers, for America, which helps in Pennsylvania and Michigan, for our dairy farmers, to increase their ability to export products to Canada and Mexico. They projected to increase their sales by more than $2 billion. So the president deserves a lot of credit for creating that economy. Also, critically, standing up to China. While Joe and Hunter Biden are making money through their contacts with the Chinese government, the president is standing up to China to try to prevent them from stealing our intellectual property. No doubt there's been some short-term pain, but over the long haul, that's something that's vital to America's economic security. So when we get to post-COVID, we get to this world, it's through principles of low taxes, limited regulations, it's going to help our economy grow again. You also have things like the Paycheck Protection Act that have helped people get through this time. Biden, on the other hand, $4 trillion in new taxes, $2 trillion in Green New Deal, environmental regulations, also wanting to take over a huge section of the economy and healthcare.
Neera, over to you.
So let me just correct a few things that Asheesh said. First of all, there is, I find it offensive to argue that Joe Biden has taken money from the Chinese. That is absolutely false. And actually, there's really no evidence that Hunter Biden has taken any money from the Chinese. And that continuing effort to go after the child of the vice president is, I have to say, I just find personally offensive. And so to just take on some of the facts around the economy and where we are, first of all, 87% of the tax cut, the Trump tax cut, went to the top 1% over the 10 years. It added $2 trillion to the deficit. And Asheesh was actually totally wrong on business investment. There was a promise that we'd cut taxes for corporations and that they'd increase investment and increase wages. That turned out to be false. Business investment fell after the Trump tax cut. It did not increase. Corporate profits increased, but that makes sense, right? Corporate profits increase because they have more money because they're not paying taxes. But it didn't go to workers. It didn't go to business investment. It didn't go to improving the bottom line. Where did it go? A lot of it went to shareholders. And that has been the truth of this economy, which is Donald Trump tells us every day the economy is going well because the stock market is doing well, while we know about the deep economic pain that exists today. And so what I would say is, if you actually are concerned about the economy, the most important thing we can do is to get this virus under control. Donald Trump has no plan to deal with the virus. He has no ability to deal with the virus. He has failed. Joe Biden has a plan to deal with the virus, and he also has a plan to reinvest and deal with demand. We have a big demand problem with this economy. Invest. He poses a Green New Deal, but he has proposed large-scale investments in caregiving, in clean energy, so the United States can actually create jobs, give people decent wages, and have an economy that works for everyone, not just the stock market.
Well, just very briefly, Neera, I'm
so glad that we're going to talk about the economy. Hold on. You'll get it.
5 seconds. I'm so glad that you referenced
1 second.
Okay.
Biden.
It's really funny how you're doing the exact same thing that both Pence and Trump did by interrupting.
Please.
Fascinating.
Well,
It's like, is it a game plan?
It would be great if Joe Biden would answer those questions about China.
Time out. She's going to be asked the next question, and then you'll get a chance to respond, and you can use your time to respond to that, to whatever you'd like at that point. I want to ask you about the question for Neera, about the Green New Deal.
Mm-hmm.
What is its in the Biden plan? Where does it overlap with the Green New Deal, and where does it not? And what are the implications for this country if if there is a Biden administration with regard to the Green New Deal?
Well, the Green New Deal, honestly, is a one-page legislative framework. So, the overlap is that they both are concerned with addressing the challenge, the really existential challenge around climate change. But the Joe Biden proposal is different and far more detailed and really explains how we're going to get there. And what Joe Biden has proposed is essentially a large scale investment in clean energy jobs. So investing in areas so that the United States can lead the world on renewables. Solar has come down dramatically. Renewable has come down dramatically. These are areas that the United States can really, again, lead the world in a new innovation and create millions of jobs all throughout the country, not just on the East Coast or Sun Belt, but all throughout the country. And so it's a $2 trillion plan to spend very aggressively in the first 4 years so that we can jumpstart that challenge. It shares a goal, right? It shares the goal of ensuring that we address climate change. But the Green New Deal has a lot more restrictions on what on fracking and other things. Joe Biden does not support fracking bans, etc. So I'd say there's a consistency of goals, but he has a detailed strategy, which is very different from the Green New Deal.
So spend very aggressively. I'm glad Neera used that phrase because that does pretty much sum up the Green New Deal. Trillions of dollars in new spending, trillions more in new regulations and mandates on the auto industry and our in our manufacturers. Not exactly what we need when we're trying to come out of a global recession and pandemic. But let's talk about fracking for a minute. And we've seen it come up repeatedly where both former Vice President Biden and Senator Harris say, "Oh no, Joe Biden doesn't oppose fracking, doesn't oppose fracking." The proposal that Joe Biden supports necessitates the end of fracking and the end of fossil fuels. He has said this in debates repeatedly that Joe Biden wants to move away from a fossil fuel economy by, I believe it's 2050, maybe it's 2035. I see different dates sometimes. What does that mean? That means the end of production of fossil fuels, of coal, oil, natural gas, and which is going to necessitate the rapid end of fracking. Whatever else it is, they say you can't have one without the other. The president takes a very different tact. He wants responsible environmental stewardship. He signed a number of laws to try to support our natural resources, including the Save Our Seas Act to limit pollution in the seas. He signed on to the 1 trillion tree initiative. He's expanded some of our national parks and resources, but he also understands we have to balance environmental protections with economic growth.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to immigration, and I'm sorry that we don't have more time for each of these, and lots of great questions coming in. What I'm going to do here is read, instead of my question, I'm going to read a question that's come to both speakers from AVP, relevant to South Asian immigrants. Which candidate is better for green cards and HR 1044 fairness for high-skilled immigrants? So Neera, first question to you.
First and foremost, Donald Trump has immigration policies that are very much skewed towards, that are restrictive towards Asia and restrictive towards any group that is not actually white, to be honest. I mean, we've seen that in their proposals, but we've also seen that come out leaked in stories, also information and data that has come from DHS, which is their immigration policies are designed to limit immigration. Their policies are designed to limit immigration from Asia, from India, from other countries, and they have a restrictive set of policies that I would argue are xenophobic and would limit the ability of Indians to come from India. And so I don't think it's, their immigration policy is not just targeting undocumented people. That is an inaccuracy. Their policies are targeting legal immigration, restricting legal immigration into the United States. And why is that? Let's be candid and honest. They have said very clearly that they view America as essentially a place of immigrants from only a certain part of the world. Why does the president never criticize white nationalist organizations or white nationalist groups? Or why does he basically say things like stand back and stand by to the Proud Boys? Because he has created, and he is essentially allowing this increase in racialized violence and racialized rhetoric in the United States. And Indian Americans, like other minority groups who are different from the majority, are some of the victims. And I think that is really the worst element of the Trump administration.
So let's talk about immigration first, and then I'll address some of the rhetoric that Neera referenced at the end. So on immigration, look, probably most of us on this call are have a South Asian heritage. I certainly do. I have family in India, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I want us to have very strong relationships with India. But the fact is that our immigration policy needs to work for America and Americans. And at the time where we have a global pandemic, unemployment because of that pandemic is higher than it should be. We need to prioritize, finding jobs for our, American workers. And once, we get back to the United States being the growth engine of the world, which it has been for, most of the Trump presidency, we'll be able to be, much more receptive to, Indian Americans and other immigrants. And yes, border security should be part of our immigration policy. We're not part of the radical left and their open immigration borders. We need to secure our borders. President Trump has made good progress with that in negotiating deals with Mexico and some Central American countries, so that they're increasing the amount of resources they're devoting to border security, and that's a good thing. Now let's talk about the rhetoric. President Trump has been maybe the best friend that India and Indian Americans have ever had. There are more, I dare say, there are more senior Indian Americans in positions around government than in any administration previously. You have, Ajit Pai running the FCC. You have Seema Verma running Medicaid. You have, multiple, judges who have been at times on the short list for the U.S. Supreme Court. Where is Joe Biden on these things? Well, Joe Biden said of Indian Americans that you can't go into a Dunkin' Donuts or 7-Eleven without having a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. In classic Biden form, that's what Joe Biden thinks of. That's what Joe Biden thinks of our American community. I have met with the president several times in the Oval Office during the Holi celebration, and he loves India and Indian Americans in our community.
Okay. Now a question about immigration to Asheesh. The fact is that H-1B visas have been cut the whole program has been paused because of the pandemic, but they were already targeted before the pandemic, and we're now told that as much as a third would be there'd be a reduction of up to a third in the new year. What is the president's plan for legal immigration to this country?
Sure. Well, look, the president supports legal immigration to this country, but in a way that makes sense for our domestic workers, and so that they can have earn decent wages. My understanding of some of those jobs is from friends of ours who are immigration lawyers in California, or that they're essentially, well, that they're very difficult jobs and they don't pay the sorts of wages they should be paying for the work that those Indian Americans are doing, that they're undercutting American wages. That's not a good thing. That's not fair to those people who are coming to this country trying to improve their lives, and it's certainly not fair to our domestic workers who are trying to, earn a competitive salary themselves. So, the president does support, legal immigration, of course, but it has to make sense for for our country and our economy.
Okay.
The Trump administration's own plans on immigration, which I welcome people to look at over the last several years, restricts immigration from Asia and increases it from Europe. I think these are very basic facts that we need to address. And the idea that Donald Trump is pro-immigration, he's pro-immigration for people who aren't brown. And he is anti-immigration, illegal immigration for people from Asia and other countries. And I just think this discourse that Asheesh should just engage in is part of the issue, which is the whole idea that we have to restrict immigration, legal immigration, right, from Asia to protect workers, American workers. The thing is, I consider Indian Americans Americans. I consider the diversity of this country its strength. I think this is, until this administration, we had bipartisan support for illegal immigration around the world. The Bush administration even had, a much different attitude towards immigration. And to argue that the Trump administration is pro-immigration, no, again, it's not pro-immigration of everybody. It has pursued restrictive policies. H-1B visas is just one example of restrictive policies towards particular groups, whether it's South Americans, Africans, or is it people from South America, Africans, or Asia. And I just have to say, that Indian Americans have benefited from an immigration policy that is not racialized, that allows people to come from all over the world who make a very difficult journey to change their lives and take a risk on this country. And that idea that we welcome immigrants has, from the moment this man started running for president, been under attack. And I just do not accept as reality that Donald Trump is pro-immigrants. That is just completely false. And the way he should look at immigration is like a balanced immigration policy actually helps America grow over the long term. That has been the fact. America's GDP has improved dramatically from our immigration policies that have been open to the world. And that is why having strong immigration policies and a strong economy go hand in hand, as demonstrated by the experience of Indian Americans who have contributed so greatly to this country.
Okay, we are now going to move on to race and civil rights. And I want to ask Asheesh the opening question. Please talk about what this president has done to help with the racial unrest that's happened in this country, and what was the plan in the second Trump administration?
Sure. Well, the president has done quite a bit of excellent things for minority communities in this country. As he likes to say, he's been the best friend that African Americans have had since Abraham Lincoln. Typical Trumpian understatement, but I think the record support might support that. Let's start out with the economy. I mean, the president, through his economic policies, created a climate in which African American unemployment was the lowest that it's ever been. He enacted bipartisan legislation, the First Step Act, to reduce the federal prison population and to reform some of the sentencing mandates that some of which had been put in place since Joe Biden supported the 1994 crime bill, which led to a dramatic surge in minorities entering the prison population. President Trump has supported historic Black colleges and universities, opportunity zones. So the president's done quite a bit for the African American community. I want to step back for a moment and address some of Neera's more recent answers, in which she repeats this trope that Trump doesn't care about African Americans, doesn't care about minorities. That's just patently false, as demonstrated by the policies enacted, and by the people who he has tasked with his administration. And I want to point out that, look, we can play this game of going through quotes all the time. It was Joe Biden who feels like he is entitled to the votes of minorities. Joe Biden, you ain't black if you're considering voting Republican. Joe Biden who said, poor kids are just as capable as white kids. What does he mean by that? It's Joe Biden who said that Barack Obama was a clean and articulate black man. We'll stipulate to Barack Obama's articulateness, but why would he comment on his cleanliness? What does that?
He didn't call him clean. He just called him articulate. He never called him clean.
Asheesh,
He called him articulate.
Neera, go ahead.
First I'll just say Barack Obama selected Joe Biden to be his vice president. So I think he was pretty comfortable. The first African-American president was pretty comfortable. But let's start with the first African-American president. Donald Trump came onto the national scene as a birther, articulating that a person named Barack Obama was not a real citizen. And, the through line of his administration has been to attack minority groups, attack different people who happen to be different from his base. But, don't take my word for it. Take the words of his former Secretary of Defense, who was so offended he had to speak out against the authoritarian impulse of a president who used federal troops to attack peaceful protesters at Lafayette who were protesting. What were they protesting? What happened to George Floyd. This president, in the wake of a horrible incident related to how the police were treated and killed a black man, decided that he was going to try to use that for political ends and create a law and order narrative by essentially clearing out protesters so he could have a photo op at a church in which, just to top the whole thing off, he carried the Bible upside down. So, we can talk about, there's what happened there. That's there's him calling people who were saying Jews will not replace us and attacking in Charlottesville. The president's actions throughout his presidency have been to sow racial division in a way that makes all minority groups, not just African Americans, but Latinos, Indian Americans, Asians, less safe in this country. And that, I think, is his greatest fault.
Okay. A question to you, Neera. And after this topic, we are going to change gears again, and we're going to talk about the environment. So please get your environmental questions ready, or comments. So Neera, this is also a comment that has come in from somebody in the audience as well, saying, asking about the racial record of the president. Is it fair to put the current atmosphere in this country all on this president, when in the case of one of our audience members, Benita, is saying that there's always been violence, there's always been racism, etc. So how do you frame that?
Yeah, I think the thing to look at is increases in hate violence. There's been amongst some cases, whether it's assaults, there's been 100% increase. We're at the highest rate of anti-Semitic hate violence. We're at the highest rate of attacks on Asians, African Americans. We are seeing a level of violence and attack. The fact that we have the President of the United States saying to a white nationalist terrorist group, the Proud Boys, to stand back and stand by, and takes days to say something very basic, which is, I abhor white nationalist groups. Can't say that. So hard for him to say. Takes days and days and days to say. Often there's a wink and a nod at these things. Obviously, this country has experienced racism, essentially since our founding. And no one takes away from that. But a job of a leader, a job of the President of the United States, is to calm our racial divisions, fight racial divides, not stir them up, not ensure that our country is essentially has one group pitted against each other, so we're all at each other's throats. That is not leadership. That's demagoguery, and that is what we've had from this president. And the proof is in the experience we've seen in a rise of racial violence towards minority groups that started in 2017, has continued through 2020, and will not abate if he is reelected.
Okay.
Well, Neera, with respect, it was your candidate who, at the start of this campaign, praised segregationists and his work with them.
Who did it? How did he start this campaign praising segregationists? You're taking quotes from like 1974, which is always what you guys have to do.
Well, thanks for interrupting me. But no, it was in one of the debates that led to Senator Harris's famous "That little girl was me" moment, when that week he had talked about how he needed to get along with segregationists to get anything done. Your candidate is also the person who said that he didn't want his children to grow up in a racial jungle. Let's talk about the president. Let's talk about racial violence. Look, what happened to George Floyd was a tragedy, and I'm not going to prejudge the criminal justice system. That's going to play out, and let's all hope that justice is done. The president's Department of Justice has opened up hate crimes investigation there, and I saw a statistic that they've opened up more hate crimes investigations this year than any other year on history. Is something they take very seriously.
Yeah, because we have so many hate crimes because of this president.
Let it finish, please, Neera.
All right. So,
my apologies.
But that is part of the law and order message that affects not only white communities, but also African American communities, Indian American communities, and everyone. I think it was Charles Barkley who said about this defund the police movement. Who are African Americans supposed to call? Ghostbusters? They, like all of us, value peace and security in our own homes. It took Joe Biden days and days to condemn the Antifa movement, which has led to looting and rioting and murders all around the country.
Okay, we are now switching gears to the environment. And I know this is, people want to still hear on these topics, but we promise to get through as many topics as we can. Okay, on the environment, the first question is to Neera. What is the plan for helping prevent climate change that a Biden administration would have? We were told that we are at the planetary point of no return in less than a decade. How will a Biden administration keep the planet safe?
This is a high priority. So let me just correct a few errors in the past part, because I really do have to just say that Joe Biden immediately condemned Antifa, and Joe Biden opposes defunding the police. In fact, he's proposed increasing funding for police, but policing that is done in a way that addresses the needs of all communities, not just some communities. But he has actually proposed increases. On the environment, first and foremost, Biden-Harris administration will recognize that climate change is one of the gravest challenges we have. He does not think it's a hoax. He does not think it's something to be ignored. It is a key priority for him. As we discussed earlier, he has a plan to invest $2 trillion in clean energy jobs. So just to correct some previous errors, there's not regulations of autos or something that gets rid of autos. And just to make clear how this works is Joe Biden wants to invest in renewables, and just like any industry, I mean, if Asheesh believes in a free market, the free market basically says that if something is no longer affordable, then people don't choose that. And what it was basically trying to do is not eliminate fracking or, it doesn't ban fracking. He does not, he just opposes a fracking ban, but he is saying, let's invest in these areas where we can produce energy domestically, renewables, clean energy, and do it in a way that helps save the planet. And that is the heart of his essential clean energy program. And the difference between him and Trump is that he has a clean energy plan. He believes in science. He believes in climate change. And Donald Trump has proposed essentially zero, other than planting a few trees, which he has not actually even done. zero actual policies to address it. In fact, most of his policies, whether it's dealing with cafe standards, has undermined our efforts to deal with climate change, including exiting the Paris Accords.
Okay, Asheesh, your response?
Well, I would love to know what a President Biden would do with the Paris Climate Accord. Now, he said he's going to re-enter them, and that's great. So what happens when India and China and other countries don't abide by its terms? The Paris Climate Accords, and part of why the president wisely decided to exit them was because it would have imposed all of these obligations on the United States and our manufacturers, while leaving the rest of the world basically to do as they please. So that was a decision made to protect American economic interests, and quite frankly, a very smart one. Look, greenhouse gas emissions have been falling under President Trump's stewardship, and he incorporates environmental protections into into legislation. So USMCA, the new NAFTA, includes some of the strongest environmental protections in any trade treaty ever. Again, we touched on this a little bit earlier. The efforts to expand our national parks, to improve conservation of our oceans through the Save Our Seas Act. So there's quite a bit that the president is doing in that regard. Let's talk about the wildfires. Tragedy. Feel horrible for the folks afflicted by that. But the president has long supported active wildlife and forest management in order to prevent these sorts of devastating events from happening in the past. The heart and soul of former Vice President Biden's plans lies with Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. He signed on to the principles of the Green New Deal.
No,
they wrote his plan. It's on your website.
Nope.
Senator Sanders talks about Joe Biden being the most progressive president ever. That means the end of fracking.
I mean, I just
You'll get a chance, Neera. Asheesh, my question was going to be about the fires in California. What do you say to people who feel that president has not done enough to step in? This is a national crisis. This is not a California crisis.
Well, first of all, you just feel horrible for those people. All of the property damage, the lives affected and damage. You just feel horrible for those folks, and certainly wouldn't blame them for feeling like somebody needs to be held responsible. Absolutely. Now, the president has used federal resources to try to provide relief to the West Coast, and he has advocated for measures such as more active forest management that would prevent such devastation from happening again. But it's a terrible situation, but I know that the administration has responded.
Okay, Neera, your response.
Well, let me first say that it is just false that India and China weren't agreeing to the Paris Accords. In fact, the world is still following the Paris Accords. China is still following the Paris Accords. India is still following the Paris Accords. The Paris Accords, basically have countries dictate their own terms. So it's just false. And it's hard for me to square saying you care about the environment if you won't acknowledge climate is real, climate change is real, and that it is a problem that we have to solve for. And since the Trump administration has no policies, and just as demonstrated by calling the wildfires a problem of forest management, when in fact the problem with the wildfires is that they're the result of climate change. They are a result of increased drying, because the forests are much drier because of the climate has changed because of man-made activities, which has been demonstrated by a scientific consensus. But that scientific consensus has been ignored, just like the scientific consensus around what we should do around the virus has been ignored. And that is one of the reasons why the president has not just ignored climate, but taken steps, whether it's deregulating methane or cafe standards. His actions are to make us go backwards on solving these problems. Joe Biden believes we have a real opportunity to lead the world in innovations around renewables. The world is moving to renewables. The United States should help lead that effort, and that's why he has such incredible investments in renewables. So we have a real alternative. But the truth is, we're going to have more and more wildfires and more climate change if a country like the United States is not willing to lead. And that is why the choice this November is existential for our democracy, but also for our planet.
Okay, we have 3 topics left. We're going to move now to South Asia and foreign affairs. First question is to Asheesh. Asheesh, when the president ran, one of the things he said, when candidate Trump ran, he said that the rest of the world will stop laughing at America, will take America more seriously. Has that happened in your estimation?
Sure, that's a great question. But one more thing on the environment. If you want to know what a Joe Biden administration looks like, Google Solyndra. Just Google the word Solyndra, and you'll see what a good use of resources the Obama-Biden administration made in terms of protecting the environment. Look, I think the president has a great record on foreign policy. And first and foremost, it starts with keeping us out of any new foreign wars. What's the president's record? Troops coming home from Afghanistan, lowering tensions with North Korea, proportionate responses in Iran, bringing our troops home, from Syria as well. Peace deals in the Middle East between Israel and UAE, historic. Standing up to China in a way that makes sense for our economic interests. The world knows that China is stealing, intellectual property and not paying by the rules. Thank goodness President Trump is, standing up for America's economic interests and rather than seeking to profit from them personally. Look at the Biden record, supporting the war in Iraq, the most disastrous U.S. intervention in the last several decades, and then he's gone around denying it. Maybe he doesn't remember that he actually did support the war in Iraq, but he voted for it in the early days. He supported it. Look at the Biden administration's record: interventions in Syria, interventions in Libya. How did that advance America's economic interests or foreign policy interests? Not at all. Beyond that, for talking to about South Asia in particular, has any U.S. president ever had a better relationship with a foreign leader than President Trump has with Prime Minister Modi? I'm not sure that they have, and it's because they share the same worldview of democracies who see the same threats in the Pacific.
I think your question was actually about the respect in the world that that the world has for America and the Trump administration. And I think this, again, is a factual issue, which is the global standing of the United States has dramatically dropped, not just in Europe, but really around the world. The world, as we saw demonstrated at the recent G7, leaders laugh at Donald Trump. They don't take him seriously. He's not considered a reliable, trusted ally. And he's one of the reasons why our global standing has so collapsed is the mismanagement of the virus. But even before then, Donald Trump alienates allies and basically celebrates authoritarians. And so he's closer to Putin than Merkel. He's denigrates NATO. He, I think has sold out. In fact, this whole argument about China, I find mind-numbing when it is clear that Donald Trump told the Chinese they could set up death camps for the Uyghurs and has turned a blind eye to Hong Kong. How can you argue that Donald Trump is somehow strong with China when he basically is just given a wave the white flag to their human rights abuses? And just to be also clear, with the trade deals we've had with China or the trade war we've had with China, the people who've suffered are American farmers who we've had to bail out through large-scale subsidies because of this failed policy. So if the question actually is, how does the world see America in the Trump era? It is that they see America as a failure, and that is at the doorstep of Donald Trump and his presidency.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Neera. There are lots of Indian Americans who are very pleased with the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi and believe that that itself is a good enough reason to vote for Trump. What is your response to them?
My response is that Joe Biden, when he was on Senate Foreign Relations and throughout his tenure in office, has had a great, has a keen understanding of India. Its role in the world. He's taken several trips as vice president to India, and he understands the connections between our two countries. And he will have a strong relationship with the prime minister and the leadership of India, as any administration would, because he recognizes the power and influence and global leadership of India. And I think that that's important, that he also recognizes the diaspora and the diaspora's role in the United States, and has respected the diaspora's role in the United States by not just his policies, which we talked about earlier, which are supporting immigration, legal immigration policies that encourage and support immigration from India and Asia.
Okay.
Well, President Trump's first UN ambassador was Nikki Haley, just a proud and incredibly impressive Indian American woman who was, our voice to the world. Let's talk about how President Trump has treated our friends. Moving our embassy to Jerusalem, something that many presidents before had promised to do. President Trump got it done. You talk about Western Europe. Well, I'm glad that President Trump will go to Germany and tell them that they're not meeting their NATO obligations, that they need to spend more on defense. Sure, that's not popular in Berlin, but that's something that Germany had agreed to, and they weren't fulfilling their obligations, and that's something that's good both for security in Europe and for the United States if they pay more. Donald Trump, he's a disruptor. He's not somebody who's always going to go with the politically correct consensus and play nice. He's going to stand up for America's interests, and that's what he's done. But the most important thing to remember with foreign policy is that President Trump has kept us out of additional needless foreign wars. I'm not sure that you can have confidence in what a Biden administration would do, because Joe Biden has shown himself to be very much of an interventionist throughout his career.
Okay. Our next topic is the Supreme Court and the Judiciary. As we know, many people, including Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, had said, there's a question to Asheesh, had said, and we want to note that we're with SABA, so lots of lawyers watching. Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, the Senate Judiciary Chairman, and others had said that in an election year, there should not be a nomination process, and that's what cost Merrick Garland the chance to go through a confirmation process. How do you, Asheesh, reconcile that with an election that's already started? It's not 14 months before the new presidency. It's right now, the election's already started, and this is being pushed through.
Because at that time, the presidency and the Senate were held by people of different political parties. Right now, they're held by the same political party. And in 2018, Republicans increased their representation in the Senate, in part because of how the Democrats treated Brett Kavanaugh. But I'm so glad you asked that question. Most people, watching this, or almost certainly, you've already decided who you're going to vote for. You're watching this for greater entertainment value, or because you're a friend of Neera's or I or what have you. The Supreme Court is an issue that, if you are at all open to changing your vote, is the reason why you should vote for Donald Trump and not Joe Biden. It is terrifying to me, and it is terrifying to lawyers, that Joe Biden has signaled his openness to packing the courts. That is, it's a version of Tony Soprano going up to John Roberts and saying, "Hey, it's a nice court that you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it." It's an attempt to intimidate the court. It's an attempt to play his far left-wing base. Let's think about what court packing looks like. probably adding 6 seats to the Supreme Court, right? So that's what President Roosevelt had proposed, getting us to 15 seats. Who knows if they'll stop there? Maybe they'll go up to 20 seats, which is what to 29 seats on the Supreme Court, which is what the Ninth Circuit has, because Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and others have pointed out rightly, if they pack the courts now, at some point in the future, when Republicans have unified control of government, they'll add a similar number of seats. It'll be a race to the bottom. It's remarkable that Joe Biden talks about how, well, gee, we need to give voters a choice. We need to give voters a say. Well, why won't he tell us straight up, is he planning to pack the court or not? People are voting while Joe Biden refused to answer that question. Why won't he release his Supreme Court list? President Trump is very transparent. He tells you who he's going to, some of the people he's considering nominating. Why won't Joe Biden do that? I submit to you is because they are radical leftist professors.
This is this whole conversation has been great because it's like hypothetical about what Biden would do when it completely contradicts what he's actually said. So it's like, it actually I feel is a good statement, because you have to make up a Joe Biden administration instead of dealing with what he said or what he's done and what he's proposed. So let me just say, your question was about Merrick Garland. I haven't practiced law in a long time. I know Asheesh has, but as you know, in the Constitution says the Senate must advise and consent. It does not say the Senate advises and consents only when it's in the same party. It says the Senate's job is to advise and consent. And that is how the Mitch McConnell's Senate broke the norms around the Supreme Court, because Merrick Garland was nominated in the spring and they refused to take up the process. I mean, they could have taken it up, had questions, had hearings, and then voted it down. They didn't even want to do that. And that is how they failed in their role to advise and consent, just by a mere power play. I will say 33 million people have voted as of today. And we are 2 weeks out from the election, and Republicans, 4 of whom were on the Judiciary Committee, who said they would never, 2 of whom said they would never do this again, would never in the same situation confirm someone, have just come up with this new rule. And what they're doing is jamming through a Supreme Court nominee with very little time in order to ensure that Amy Coney Barrett can sit and preside on anything that has to do with this election and the ACA. And I have to say, that seems honestly like an abuse of power to the majority of Americans who strongly oppose rushing through this nomination and believe the next president should not name this person, name the justice. But of course, they don't want to do that because they are desperate to ensure that Amy Coney Barrett is interpreting the rules of this election if and when the president chooses to litigate them, because he will not accept the results. Another thing he has said in his own words, that he may not accept the results.
Okay, we have just 10 minutes left, and I have several questions from the audience, and also want to ask about voting and the voting process and what's happening here. So I'm going to ask a quick question. We're going to go to the lightning round right now, and I'm going to start with Neera with a question about voting. What is your take on what is happening with voting? What are the things that people who are feeling overwhelmed by all the aspects of voting that's happening right now? What is your advice to people who are deciding how and when to vote?
Please vote early. I think there's been a lot of misinformation by President Trump around voting, which I think, again, is a shame and really unfortunate. Again, most presidents don't attack voting or what have you, but here we are. So vote early. And let me say some good news in the voting. 33 million people have voted. We have 20% of the people who have voted are new voters. They are skewing younger and more female. So lots of people are coming into the process to vote, and that is really exciting. And if you're concerned, I'm personally going to vote early in person. My first day is Monday. I recommend if you feel safe and comfortable, mask up, social distance, and then vote in person. But if not, if you're voting by mail, strongly recommend voting as soon as possible, like now. The safest thing if you're voting by mail is to take your ballot into the local board of elections or a drop box if your state has it. I know there's a lot of anxiety about voting, a lot of anxiety about the Trump administration, and I have to say, voters are facing restrictionist tactics throughout the country, but courts are ruling against them, and this is a very exciting time. But please vote early.
Asheesh.
Well, I'm going to use part of my time to go back to the Supreme Court, since we have a panel of an audience probably includes a lot of lawyers. Very simple question, Neera. Will Joe Biden pack the court, and who will he pack it with? And the fact that Joe Biden won't answer that question, has refused to answer that question at his town hall last week with George Stephanopoulos. He said, "Oh yeah, he committed to giving an answer before Election Day." Why, you're a representative of the Biden campaign, why can't you answer that question before a panel of lawyers?
Can I answer? I'll tell you why. Do you want me to tell you? Can I answer now?
Yeah. Is he gonna pack the court? Sure. And
So,
how many people?
I think the actual answer to this is Joe Biden is not playing the game where you guys rush through this nomination and let all the energy come onto what Joe Biden is going to do. That's why if she's confirmed tomorrow, he will announce his plan tomorrow. If she's confirmed Monday, he will announce his plan on Monday. Joe Biden is not going to allow the courts to be an engine of Republican opposition to a Democratic administration. And he's going to announce his plan in plenty of time, which will be a lot sooner than Donald Trump's plan on healthcare. So
Well,
I'm glad we have that.
There you go. So Joe Biden will not allow the courts to be, something that's a tool to
the arm of a Republican administration.
Well, there you
healthcare.
go. Well, there you go. I think we have some actual news tonight, folks. Neera Tanden has just conceded that Joe Biden will pack the courts.
I did not concede anything. For example, he could be for term limits which 80% of Americans support term limits for justices on the Supreme Court. You can do term limits in a constitutional way. So he may well come out for term limits. I think that would be a great idea.
Well, there you go.
Are you opposed to term limits?
Anything?
Go ahead. Lots of people have asked questions.
Yes.
So
I'm sorry.
A clear answer.
Sheree, can I have just a moment? There was a lot there. Okay, so here we go. Joe Biden wants to fundamentally eliminate one of the checks and balances set up in the Constitution.
You support term limits for members of Congress. How do you not support term limits for lifetime judges?
We haven't talked about that at all. And
I know, but Donald Trump does. Donald Trump supports term limits.
Sure. Just a couple seconds. Well, basically, we have this is the attitude of the far left, which is that if there is opposition to what they want to do, they are going to remove that opposition, whether we're talking about the Supreme Court, the filibuster, the Electoral College.
You guys did Garland, and you're talking about restructuring the rules. You changed the rules around the courts and then act like you've done nothing.
Okay,
folks, I hope we can get some other questions in.
Yeah, I want to get some questions in. Theodore is asking, neither Trump nor Biden has demonstrated even the slightest interest in fiscal prudence. Can we therefore expect ballooning deficits to continue for the next 4 years? Short answers, please. Asheesh first, and then Neera.
Well, it is unfortunate for our fiscal stability that we're facing this global pandemic. Even I, as a fiscal conservative, recognize that we need to spend a lot more money to help Americans get through this time. But that is something that the president has committed to doing in a second term. In contrast, I would say, to the Biden administration, which is already pre-committed to trillions of dollars of new spending on the Green New Deal and the public health takeover of healthcare system.
Okay, Neera, response to that?
Really quickly, Donald Trump ballooned the deficit by $2 trillion for a giant tax cut. However, Joe Biden's plans, which are actually fully paid for, addresses so he does not balloon the deficit over the long term of his plans. He actually has ways to pay for it, which will be in stark contrast by the actions of the Trump administration, which passed a giant tax cut entirely funded by the deficit pre-pandemic. So we all agree about the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, Donald Trump was adding trillions of dollars to the deficit.
Okay, I'm going to ask two quick questions. Let's keep going. Ankush asks, does pulling out of Afghanistan is that going to bring stability to South Asia, or is it help destabilize South Asia by helping people like the Taliban? Neera first.
I think we all agree that we need to get out of Afghanistan. The question is how you do it. And the president's own military, there was a story out last week in which General Milley is quoted saying that the president's national security team, his president's approach, will destabilize Afghanistan and the surrounding region. So that, I think, is a deep, deep concern. We need adults to handle these negotiations and adults to manage these processes so that they don't end up rippling through South Asia, Southeast Asia in ways that can hurt India and other countries.
Well, Neera, that was an excellent answer, and I really hope that you are on the list to be one of the 6 to 20 new justices that Joe Biden is planning to add to the U.S. Supreme Court. But look, let me say on Afghanistan, it is President Trump who finally, after almost 20 years now in Afghanistan, has made the decision, sometimes in opposition to members of the military, that it's time to bring our troops home. He's certainly working with the Afghani government and actually working with the Taliban. Unfortunately, they are still there, but he's working with them to try to find a responsible peace deal that will allow Afghanis to run their country in a safe way.
Okay, we're going to leave Padma Shah with the final question. When do you think we will return to more civility in our public discourse? I see so much polarization at all levels in every medium and across the political spectrum. Just as the Justices Ginsburg and Scalia were friends, why is it difficult for others to follow their stellar examples? And many of you have seen the photographs of both of them on an elephant in India. So I will have Neera go first, and then Asheesh, and then we'll wrap it up.
I think this election is actually doing that. I saw Cindy McCain is endorsed Joe Biden. John Kasich has endorsed Joe Biden. And I think that you see a range of Republicans this morning. The former Republican chair, Michael Steele, is the person who ran the Republican Party, endorsed Joe Biden. And you're seeing a broad coalition of Americans of all ideological stripes reject this kind of scaremongering about the left, which is just patently false, and come together and say that it's time that we have a president that unites the country, that Donald Trump is a divisive person who has essentially tried to divide Americans against each other. He attacks people, he uses his Twitter account to attack people personally, viciously, Republicans and Democrats, and a lot of people from across the political perspective. What I think is a great aspect of Joe Biden is that he has united people as diverse as Cindy McCain and to Bernie Sanders. They're not going to get their way with his agenda, but they recognize that we need a president who can unite the country. And Joe Biden has done that throughout his life, throughout his career as a senator. He worked very well with Republicans and Democrats to forge compromise. And he recognizes that to save this country in this moment, we need more bipartisanship and less hostility. And that's why he's put together a coalition that can do that. A coalition made up of Republicans, Democrats, and independents.
Well, I really hope that civility will return, after Election Day with the start of as we move into President Trump's second term. It really has been unfortunate the past few years that the national dialogue has not been where we want it to be. But I would say that really started, quite frankly, with the Democrats' refusal to accept the legitimacy of the Trump presidency. It started really from even before the president was inaugurated with the phony Russia hoax. Bob Mueller knew months into his investigation that there was no collusion, and yet Neera, you can shake your head like that, Neera, but you brought it up today. I would love for you to answer this question. Do you accept that Donald Trump is the legitimately fairly elected president of the United States of America? We're now.
Yes, sure, I do. Yes, I do.
Well, that's great to hear, because so many of your colleagues, when they're asked that question, they'll talk about, they'll talk about Russia or
That doesn't give an excuse for his division, though.
Ever.
That's not an excuse for his division. Even if anyone that's not an excuse for him to be so divisive.
Do you think I can talk?
You asked me a question.
There are these things called rhetorical questions too. But look, the national discourse hasn't been where we wanted it to be over the last few years, and quite frankly, it was poisoned by, it was poisoned by the attempt to delegitimize the Trump presidency. But I hope that that after the election we'll all come together, and I see that Neera's former boss, Senator Clinton, has said that under no circumstances should Joe Biden concede the election to Donald Trump. I really hope, Neera, that you will disavow that advice.
That's not what she said, just so you know.
I really hope that if the president wins re-election, I'm personally confident that he will, that the Democrats will accept that wholeheartedly, and that we can get on to the important businesses of the country.
Okay, before I bring Priya on, we just realized that nobody mentioned a lawyer who is on the ticket, who is of South Asia.
I know. It's so terrible.
Brought her up, so I'm going to give each of you a chance to reflect on what it means that she is running as the nominee for the vice presidential spot in the Democratic ticket. I'll ask Asheesh to go first, Neera, and then we're done. So please keep it short. Priya standing by. And I don't know if she was a member of SABA, but she could have been as a lawyer of South Asian origin. Asheesh, that over.
Well, look, of course, congratulations to Senator Harris. Great for her in her career. And at one level, it is good for the Indian American community, absolutely. But I think the fact that she hasn't been mentioned at all, reflects that she's been made invisible, by the Biden campaign. Look at what Donald Trump has done. Look at all the senior Indian Americans who are populating the Trump administration, or have populated the Trump administration, from Nikki Haley, on down. The president has integrated Indian Americans into his administration. This isn't something that's done 3 months before an election to try to appeal to certain demographics.
Neera?
I think making someone your vice presidential nominee is a pretty great sign of how you're going to treat somebody. And I've really been honored to know Kamala Harris for over a decade when she was Attorney General, and I know her personally, and she's very proud, particularly of her mom, her Indian mom, and the struggles and fights and just incredible story of her mother. And I think it's one of the reasons why she's been so committed to fair immigration policies, because her mom came here as an Indian student in the 60s and became a single mom, but because of the true greatness of this country, was able to raise two incredible daughters who've been, I'd say, the American success story. And I think Kamala shares that kind of American success story with so many members of the Indian American community who have come here to really change, really change the country for the better. And so I'm incredibly proud of her. And I would note that she there are now 5 Indian Americans in Congress, I think all Democratic at this point. And then we also, just to say, there are a range of people who served in the Obama administration. I served on healthcare, Red Shot, USAID. But I think we will all be proud of the great diversity in a Biden-Harris administration and the great contribution Indian Americans will make in that administration, starting with Kamala, but definitely not ending with her.
I want to thank both of you for being here, for sharing your insights and giving us your time. Folks, it's been my pleasure and honor to moderate this discussion. Thank you very much. Please keep the conversation going, and please tweet at Saba, and my Twitter is @Sri if I can answer anything. And over now to Priya.
Hi, everybody. On behalf of SABA North America and SABA-DC, I just wanted to thank again Neera and Asheesh for a lively and informative debate. It was really excellent to watch and a lot of fun. And thanks very much to Sri for keeping things moving and getting us through all of those important issues that we were all interested to hear. And thank you everybody who joined and tuned in for this event. Please check out our website, SABA-DC.org. We've got several events coming up in the next couple weeks, and we'd love for you all to join us. Thanks very much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Neera, for a good discussion.
Thank you, Asheesh. Since it was good to be with you.
Folks, just a reminder that Diya TV USA, the YouTube handle, has the video, and so anybody can watch now or later. So it's available. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.